Hello, welcome to another Minecraft update. So for this update, I want to quickly take a look at something in the test build, and then we'll move over to talk about updates in Harbor Town. So what we're looking at here is a building that I completely imported as a schematic. What that means is it means that someone else built this, and then someone else saved it in a way that another person can come and download it and then just paste it into the world. No building required. So for the most part, that's not really as much fun for building and just playing the game. But one thing that I like to do in this case is I like to take these builds sometimes if there's a particular style that I kind of like, and I want to sort of basically rebuild it. So, or, remake it, remodel it, like, home improvement. So, as you can see here, I took that house, that design, and I would argue I improved it. So, we'll just go around the outside. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time with this. Um, Let's see if I can get the camera to be slow enough. Maybe I can just kind of give you a chance to sort of see. And kind of in the background, you can sort of see that, that old building and its style. As you can tell, I'd go for a little bit of a smoother style. I try to find a way to make buildings look like they have some detail, but without trying to minimize some of the obvious blockiness. Um, and I should also say that the person who built this was probably using a different texture pack, so, you know, maybe it looked better for them. But for me, this was much preferred. Um, and so, come around the outside, you can see that I added um, some balcony and raised patio area, um, and a big chimney outside. Um, Not really forge, just like an open fire pit uh, back there. And yeah, so mainly what I wanted to do was just not talk about all the details of the build, but just show how, like, another thing that can be enjoyable to do sometime. I'm going to end up putting this on Rich People's Bluff somewhere in Harbor Town eventually, but being able to sort of import somebody else's build without even building any of it, but using it as a template, or not a template, I guess, but as a reference. So then I built this, but was able to change it to kind of look and feel the way that I would like it most, and add some things to it and stuff. So, all right, so let's go over to Harbor Town. All right, and here we are back in Harbor Town, and man, so much stuff that I want to talk about today, and I'm gonna do my best to um, keep it limited here. First thing, because I was talking about how you could import other builds and just paste them in without ever having to build them yourself, and I was talking about how most of the time that's not necessarily as much fun, and I want to at least build in some way, like the buildings, or you know, no matter how much I customize them or how little. But here's a great example of an exception. So a couple of videos back, I told you I talked about, like, oh, it'd be nice maybe to have kind of another ship out here just to sort of make it feel like there's traffic into the harbor. Well, I was kind of like, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with that. Well, one of the things I really knew is that I didn't really feel like building another ship right now. But I happened to find a beautiful design um, that was available for to download and import in your world. And so for this, I felt like, this to me feels more like a decoration. And I was like, I just want to drop that out there in the sea, just so that it gives a little bit of a sense of, that sort of a little bit of more kind of living sense around the harbor. I will say that I'm incredibly impressed, and this is an absolutely amazing job. And it is cool because I think it will help. I will probably at some point use it to help me build, future ships when I want to. But for right now, I was just really happy to have it as a decoration and just sort of drop it in out here in the ocean. But I did want to just take a quick moment to look at it just because, man, it deserves appreciation. That guy, that's a great looking boat. Okay, so back to my stuff. Um, so today's a day of a lot of small but important updates, I guess. So the first thing is that you can see that the ground has changed a lot. I have settled on some textures for the streets and for the surrounding area. Now, there's no detail at all right now. So, I could imagine like when finished filling this in, it was a little bit satisfying because it was just, oh, I don't know, there was a cleanness to it, and I could clearly distinguish sort of like the streets from the rest of the sort of ground. It just looked more finished, but it also looks incredibly sterile uh, and a little bit artificial. So one of the challenges and these streets are all filled in around here except for some areas where I'm making some new streets. Um, and wanted this kind of dirt slash rocky texture as the basic things rather than just straight grass or something. Just because I think that just feels more like it fits in here around this kind of heavily traveled, commercial and harbor area. But like I said, it's very, very stale. It's very straight, and just feels like a computer made it. So now the challenge is to figure out how to add detail and variation in order to make it feel a little more alive. Minecraft is a really funny, kind of ironic thing to play because the very fact that it's all basically based more or less on these cubes is its greatest strength in terms of being able to build easily and be creative. But then you also spend a tremendous amount of time trying to come up with clever ways to mask that blockiness or make things feel a little more interesting. So now I have the task of trying to figure out exactly how to do that. So I'll give you a couple examples of what I'm thinking of, and then we'll move on to a couple other things before we end. So the first thing that I'm going to try is I'm going to try breaking up this border for the roads periodically along this long sort of path so that it is not always just in a straight line. So I'm thinking, for example, of periodically, um, and I'm not going to worry about making it the right size right now, but just offsetting like this way and then maybe back this way, maybe even in a little bit, and then maybe back out over here, back this way. Um, and the hope is that, oh, I don't like it going in that far. Well, anyway, the hope here is that when you kind of scale back, or really even if you're just walking along the road, that it'll result in something that still looks like this road is basically going straight down this harbor wall, but not so much like a computer just generated a perfectly straight line. So that's one option. So obviously I'll come back and clean that up later. So the next thing I'm going to try is I'm going to try eliminating some of these right angles everywhere. So, for example, making this maybe kind of curve in a little bit at kind of an angle of some kind, something like that. Um, Obviously I'm going to go for these flat slabs later, but just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, I'm going to start trying to kind of play around with that. Then I'll also, another example what I'm trying to do is I'm going to see about what some different colored blocks might be like to break up some of the sameness of this. Um, so those are some examples of some things that I'm going to try to do to sort of make this look a little more alive. And while I fear that this particular video is a little bit on the boring side, I kind of wanted to sort of mention this to you now so that next time when I have an update and I've done all of this stuff, I'm hoping that you can kind of compare and kind of remember this sort of plainness right now and then compare that to what it looks like after I finish trying to put in detail. Obviously, going to have to figure out what I want to do to add some kind of detail into this area here. Um, and I have a few ideas, but nothing solid yet. So the only thing I want to do right now is just sort of showcase a couple of new additions to the harbor. So since the last time we did an update, we've completed this building here. This is the first building that I've done using some wood for the ground floor instead of variations of stone. And I'll do more of that. But I think that turned out really nice. I like the sort of design, the design woodwork. Just gives it a little bit of, again, you're looking for ways to break up the monotony, and so I thought that looked pretty nice. Um, we're gonna have an outdoor area over here, and we're gonna have another path connecting to. Decided to add another stairway down into the rest of the town here, along with the other two that I planned. And so I really like this building. But at this point, as you can see, the buildings are, you want them to have some kind of uniqueness. This one has this little kind of overhang interest in here, and it actually has this little tower jutting out, and what it actually is inside, it's actually where the stairs are, going up to both floors. So yeah, you want to be able to find ways to make the buildings stand out a little bit, but also there's a point when I'm building in town where the buildings kind of become buildings. They're cool and all, but I'm not saying that they're not. But they're not. It's like, yeah, I added another building here. Guess what? I'm going to be adding several more buildings. Um, so trying to just stick with some quick showcases and not going into massive detail about every one of these builds, because there's going to be several more coming up. Mainly what you can see here is me continuing to kind of get a sense, sort of loosely outline places where these buildings can go. We want to get all of this area filled in here. Um, and then the last thing I guess I'm going to comment on is I'm having a really difficult time doing the paths here in up in Rich People Bluff. So I guess to start, what I'll say is you can see that I've done some landscaping, so I've started to fit this building into the surrounding landscape. Um, remember, as you can see up here, some of these buildings that I had built somewhere else. I actually built this one down closer to the water, but then moved them and was like, oh, I think that needs to be up on Rich People Bluff. So when I copied them over here, they don't perfectly fit on a non-flat landscape. So there's some work to do to get these to sort of feel like they're sitting on the bluff the ways that they should. So the first one that I did, well, it's not true, not the first one. The first one I did is I completed all of the terraforming for your house around the bluff so that it's now firmly planted on a foundation. So I almost forgot about that. So yeah, that was the first thing that I did. And then the next, I was over here, so I started to try to blend this one in a little bit. And it's not completely blended, but it's a start. And so, okay. But next, what I was trying to do is turn these place where I've outlined these paths into actual path that winds around and goes up the hills and winds back around. Okay, I know this can be done, but I am definitely not happy with what I've tried to do so far. I just, it's obviously it's very difficult to make a path like this. That's, first of all, it curves on its own, then it's changing all this elevation, and you don't have any way to, it's not very easy to try to make those elevation changes feel smooth at all. I don't care if it's not perfect. I mean, I know it's a blocky world, but I just don't like I just don't like how this looks. So as you can see here, I've tried to add some different levels to kind of make it feel a little more like it's, kind of a smoother incline. Um, but there's a number of things that I don't think that I'm not super liking about this right now. One is that I think this area where I tried to use these textures here, I think this makes the path look a little too narrow, and frankly, a little too, it looks a little too lower class. It looks a little too poor for rich people bluff. So one thing I want to do is I think I want to maybe try some other ideas other than dirt path. Maybe I'm going to use some sort of stone, um, and then I'm going to have to kind of rethink how I wind this path up and around. Um, I mean, I know it can be done, but just I don't. I'm just not happy with how I started this right now, which is fine. That's why I did this little test patch to just try some things out, and I'm just not happy with it. I don't exactly know what I'm going to do, but we'll have to figure something out. So in the meantime, I've got some other room here to plop a few other houses in. I'd like to drop that other house onto the bluff. It is going to be interesting because it's very, very tall. I have to kind of figure out where it might responsibly live. Um, Anyway, this is I think that all I have to update today. It's weird. I kind of wanted to make the video, but it's this strange kind of in between spot. So hopefully it didn't feel too dull. I'll be looking forward to making another video once I've had more of an opportunity to do some of the detailing down here. Um, and until then, take care and have a nice night.